All right.
There we go. It is September 24th, and it's time for Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Tinderbox developer Mark Bernstein. We were to have Stacy Mason, ex-Eastgater, current game studio impresario, but Stacy came down with a nasty COVID, and so she will be rescheduling for mid to late October. I'll let you know the date on the forum. Next week, we have Mike Rohde, who wrote the sketchbooking handbook and is also responsible for the sketchbook font that you will find bundled with Tinderbox. So that will be very interesting. And without further ado, here's Michael Becker.
Hey everybody, welcome. So typical Tinderbox format is we go around the room and new people introduce themselves. We then talk about any particular project we're working on. And then if there is a theme, we drive into that theme. Today we don't have a theme because unfortunately Stacy is down with COVID. So let's go around the room. Anybody new? I don't see anyone new. So then the question is, are we any of us working on any particular project? From an agenda perspective, just to help us guide the conversation, Mark Anderson and I figured out a new strategy for managing status states for a note. So in other words, if you have a note, say status is from a sales perspective, won or lost, or a to-do list is complete or in progress, rather than using conditionals, we figured out a dictionary strategy for that. So I'd like to show you our approach for doing that, because I think it would be really, really useful to dig into the dictionary, and it's a great, very concrete case to explain a lot of Tinderbox and the function of dictionary. So I'm going to put that on the agenda.
Wait a minute. First, define what you mean in this context by dictionary.
The function of dictionary in Tinderbox. It's the dictionary.
David,
I get it. Stop. That's not what we're talking about.
I have not had any coffee. I haven't had breakfast. This isn't fair.
David, we're talking about it. We're not talking about definitions. We're talking about a functional thing. Okay. Who else? If anybody, does anybody else have a topic or a project they've been working on? Like Detlef, have you made any progress? I think you got templates in, I believe.
Yeah, especially for you, the external file thing now supports templates, and I think it's more or less working and finished. It should do what it should do, and it does what it should do, and it's working right now fine. And yeah, for the templates, I had a small issue because Tinderbox is if you have an external HTML file, Tinderbox will interpret it the file, and so for example, using the attribute $text with copying from the external file doesn't work because it's the content is not there, and I used a curl run command to solve this with a cat command. It works. It's working fine. Yeah, try it out. Especially the template part is it's from Michael only.
So can you drop the link to the thread so we can add it in the chat, so we can add it to the
sure,
and give the name as well, not just the link. All right. Anybody else have any other projects they're working on? Stuff they talked about, like thinking about since last week. Also, any reflections from our discussion with Joel Chan last week on the idea of doing claims and evidence? And
yeah, very interesting comments about what he was talking about, the way he studies. He was taking notes. Do you realize that when we were talking, he has a recorder. He's taking notes on reflection on what's happening from that meetup. And I thought the guy was a brilliant guy. And I think Tinderbox is a good solution for him too as well. But he's not into it yet. But once he gets into it, he's going to be really involved with the Tinderbox community and taking his research to the next level. But yeah. Pretty serious dude, man. The guy is like really, I'm jealous.
Yeah, he's built this whole career around it. I mean, I really like what he called CKM, the whole idea of collaborative knowledge management, and the different methods and approaches he's taking to do that. Awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
good guy. Yeah.
Anyone else before we dive in? Going. Art, you got anything for us?
I was afraid you were going to call me out.
I'm always going to call you out.
Yeah, I've been like, I've been doing one really cool thing. So, as you guys know, I've been talking about Obsidian and the like. But one of my Tinderbox projects is basically sort of a life plan action project. And I've over the years I've implemented the para system, PARA, the one that Tiago Forte talks about. And so what I was doing during the course of last week is I mirrored my organization in my Obsidian file and in my Action Tinderbox project, so that it now operates as a pure the Obsidian operates as a pure feeder into Tinderbox. So all my folders, my containers match up with the folders in Obsidian. And so I can take notes temporarily, or I can start a new project, and then when I feel like it's refined enough, then I export it. I pull it into that particular Tinderbox project. But in looking at it this way, Obsidian can only be a tiny subset of what Tinderbox can do for me, but it's doing it well because it's a lot messier and dirtier, and I don't really have to worry about what I put in there or what I dump out of there. And I can keep my Tinderbox project a lot cleaner.
Yep. And in regards to since there are many people that may not be familiar with Tiago or the para method, do you mind giving a brief overview of both who Tiago is and the para method?
Oh, sure. I only know what I remember, and I've been running with it, but I'll give you a vague idea. There's a guy called Tiago Forte. He's I think he's based in California, and he sort of rose to fame as the guy behind the phrase BASB, which is acronym for building a second brain. And it's just a carry on from people before him, like Dave Allen and things like that, who go dump everything that you think about onto digital or paper format, and then so that way your mind is always clear. You can just be in the present, and you're not burdened by tasks that you don't get the time to finish, and things that you may have forgotten. And he goes with two basic acronyms. One is code. If somebody is able to post his stuff on the chat, maybe it could explain it better than I can, but his code method is something like what your 5Cs is a little bit, but in terms of organize, I don't really follow the code part, but I follow his organization, which is what he calls para, and that essentially is that all your tasks and all your sort of your life work can be well organized by dividing it into projects, areas, resources, and archives. And essentially your projects are the things that you're actively doing right now. So I may have 5 or 10 projects on the go. So in my P folder, I'll have my active projects. And so these are things which have a deadline. I've got to finish this particular thing. It's quantified, and I have to finish it by X date or X time. And within that project folder, each of my projects will have tasks, and each of the tasks will have deadlines or schedules, or they're linked to actual achievements. And the areas is a much larger realm. That's basically everything that I'm interested in, and that could be my current project, could be my relationship with my parents, it could be my hobbies. All those things go into areas. Those are basically, sort of dreams without any actual schedule or objectives, without any actual fixed plan. The idea, I think, being that areas is this giant realm, and projects are those particular individual projects that you pull out from your realm to work on right now. So that's your front burner. And then resources basically are things that are just doesn't fit in the above two. And archive obviously is self-explanatory. But I think operating this way, it basically allows me to separate my active projects from just the general realm of all the things that I'm interested in or might become interested in any given time.
Got it. And I found the code link. It's capture, organize, distill, and express. Which you're right. It's similar to my five C's model.
Yeah, not too dissimilar, but I don't really pay attention to his because again, he's really talking about the ideology behind it, which I think everybody follows their own, you know, and whatever works for them.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Thank you for that. That's really good. One other thing that I've heard recently that came up from Tom Diaz this morning when I was talking to him with him on the walk on the dog was Tiago also offers, I don't know if he's termed it, but his tag methodology, one thing he adds is an action verb and a context with every tag. So whenever he creates a note, you would say, you know, read and work. So I'm going to read this in the context of work. And so he also has a tagging method that he uses that I think is interesting to explore at some point.
Yeah, so I'm terrible with as far as tags goes, and quite honestly, for me, tags operates best in Tinderbox because I really am more interested in sort of the concept of a tag as a metadata rather than as a methodology for filing and retrieving information. It just works better for me because I can never remember what my tags are. Because it's kind of important to corral. You know, if you're going to have tags, you should basically try to have some bounds around it. If you're doing it in this you know activity realm, in Tinderbox you don't really need that because I think there the idea is that my tags shall proliferate. You know, and then there's no limit to them.
Yeah. Oh, hold on, just the dog wants to go pee. Just a second. Sorry about that. You were all important, but when the dog hails, we know who the real boss is.
Oh yeah, and then the consequences can be mighty dangerous. So
Exactly. All right. So thanks, Art. That's great. Anybody else have any other thoughts, ideas? If not, well, yeah, Paul.
So, as usual, I come with kind of a low-level Tinderbox need, but right now I'm working on this project that I'm just starting. I joined a group of folks who discuss a short story every week from the Best American Short Stories book, and it's a lot of fun. I'd like to use Tinderbox to kind of collect the information about the story, characters, plot, etc. I mean, pretty basic stuff, but what I'd like to do now is I'd like to use posters and an AI call to go out and pull back whatever's available for a short story and an author and populate a Tinderbox map. And I'm wondering if anybody's tried that or if has directions for me to find a poster that might work in that context.
A poster. I wouldn't have necessarily jumped directly to poster. Detlef did some really good work on integrating Tinderbox using curl to ChatGPT, at which point you could say, hey, ChatGPT, give me everything you know about this story, and that would come in as a note. But I don't necessarily know how that might come in as a poster. Because especially if you're using AI, you need to be mapping the output of that AI to that particular poster's JavaScript or language's attributes so that the data maps to populate the poster rendering. So I'm thinking we might be talking about different things, but if you're just wanting to know what the AIs know about a particular story, I would go either manually use ChatGPT and copy paste it into Tinderbox or use Detlef's curl code.
Interesting. Okay, good.
I would
Thanks.
think a lot of that depends on what you're trying to. Sorry, I think that a lot of that depends on actually what you're trying to visualize within those stories. It seems to me almost that you're best served by sort of building a set of notes in Tinderbox on that particular story while you're discussing it, and then using hyperbolic view or something like that. And then maybe pulling parallels. So if you're discussing one short story today, another one 5 weeks hence, with which may have sort of a similar concept or maybe the same author, then you can sort of, gain the accumulated incremental formalization that Tinderbox affords.
Hey,
Interesting.
art that works, but I also got the spidey sense that part of what he wants to do is like be smarter than all the other kids in the room. So let's get ChatGPT to tell him exactly what the story's about.
Ooh. Now that
Hey,
goes
what's
into
wrong with that?
Nothing. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I was having this discussion just yesterday about ChatGPT, and I was remembering the Tinderbox forum debate about the idea of throwing all data from the forums and the manuals into a ChatGPT environment, and then learning how to use Tinderbox from that. And I'm like,
catch that.
no,
I'm gonna jump off the server.
Sorry.
Right? It's like
I clicked on a link.
that's okay. And so like my brain operates completely differently. I'm all about making it atomic and divining my own sort of extracting my own meaning from the data. And I can't really even think in terms of ChatGPT. But I guess I think the world is going to be sharply divided on that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, or not. I mean, it will. There's a room for both, I think, as opposed to being polarized and divided. All right. Paul, so I don't think we have an immediate answer for you, but Detlef, if you can pull up a link to your
Yeah, I got it.
curl code. No, that was a video that Mark found about ChatGPT. That wasn't Detlef's curl code. I don't think, or did he? That was a different link.
Sorry, well, I'm pasting the right thing in a moment.
Got it. All right. Oh no, you got it. Yeah, Tinderbox in the open API. Got it. All right. I'm just going to copy that into my notes here too. Perfect. Okay. Anything else, Paul, or are we good? Good. All right. Who's got anything else? If not, I'll jump into the project code, and we haven't done this in a while, of like doing a debrief on some Tinderbox functionality, which could be fun. So let's just go ahead. Stop me at any point in time if you'd like to bring something else up. But for now, we'll do this approach. Okay, so we'll start with a blank Tinderbox file, and we'll kind of start constructing an overall concept. And the goal for today is to discuss, let's go ahead and do a little readme here. And the goal today is to discuss Tinderbox dictionary versus, let's learn how to spell, conditions. So let's say these are the functions we want to review. Functions, my fingers are tired. And the context is status notes. Okay, and so what I mean by that is, let's say you have a series of notes, and again, I work better in outline view. Sorry for those map view people. Let's say you have a series of notes, and for the sake of this this session, we'll just call it meetings. I'm brainstorming a little bit. It could also be to-dos as well. And why don't we go back and we'll make it to-dos later too when we're done. And so we'll call this one like meeting one, and then I'll just copy and paste these real quick. So let's say you have 3 meetings. Okay, and we'll put dates and such on that in just a minute. And that these meetings are going to have statuses. Let's say one's being scheduled, one's in progress, and one's complete. So, and then what you want to be able to do is, and let's go back to here, the status notes. And what we want with these status notes is have track status of note and provide visual affordance to the note. Right. So let's say that's what we want to accomplish. And as we think about it, maybe the different statuses that we want to capture are to schedule, scheduled. I'm just brainstorming here a little bit. And so you could say in progress if it's like an event or something like that, but that might be a stupid one for this context. The concept of in progress might be better for a like a to-do. Complete. canceled, right? And then you could have like, you know, if you're doing a sales funnel, you might have won and lost. So what this does is this starts helping us realize too, as we do this brainstorming of different statuses. Statuses are really relevant depending on the type of context. You know, so in the case of like a sales funnel or pipeline, it's won or lost, or a game, if you're analyzing that. You know, to-dos, these could be applicable, but like in progress doesn't make sense for meetings, but it's more appropriate for a to-do possibly. So there's a whole bunch of different types of statuses that you might want. And then you might want to think about too, when you're thinking about the visual affordances of a status. And again, this is all incremental. For me, it's like I'm kind of giving you my end state review of the capabilities I want from this process, but I incrementally kind of develop this along the line. Let me get Frederick's name here. I keep roll of who's attending here. Okay, and then so what are some of the statuses that, and rather than me giving you all the my thoughts here, what kind of visual affordances might you want from a note, or things that you'd want to change depending on a status? Anyone want to contribute some ideas? Thoughts? Come on, Ken, throw out something.
Objectives, right?
Yeah, or like if you're visually looking at a note and you wanted one of these statuses to be able to represent visually that status
description, you put a description of the topic or something, right?
Yeah, you could, but I'm actually talking about the visual aspect of the note. Like if this note's done, if this note's scheduled, this note is canceled, and this note is in progress, how do I visually know that without actually looking at the attribute? Right.
How about a checkbox for
By
completed?
the badge, right?
You could have a checkbox. You could have a badge.
Color.
You could have flags. Yep. All right. Now you guys are with me. You could have some kind of flag. You could have a color. Okay. Another one you might have is NameStrike. Right. So they, you know, does the, you know, if it's lost, you know, make it red and strike its name through. Right. So that way you can have Tinderbox not just have the attribute values of those, but you're going to use those attribute values to help you create automatic visualizations for the notes. So let's pause there and let's start going into two different approaches, aka what I'll call functionality, that I've used in the past for doing this. And let me go ahead and fix my regex styling here. Or not, excuse me, my markdown styling. So that way, anybody using markdown will be able to. Right. Sorry to be anal about this, but it helps the formatting later. I'll fix those later. Okay, so now where do we want to go here? So as I'm thinking about this, you know, you could start by saying, well, I want a status attribute. Okay, and so we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll create this status attribute as a set. Okay, so I've now created that status attribute as a set for those that, sorry, I should have let you see it off screen. Now the challenge with doing this, one by one by note is that obviously it creates a lot of manual effort. So what you do is you go up to the file menu, you hit prototype. I'll just randomly select person to get prototypes in there. That gives me the prototypes folder. And so let's go ahead and create like P meeting. Right. So I can create my own meeting prototype if I want. And I can go ahead and say this is a status. And then I can go ahead and apply the meeting prototype to those meetings. Now you could also use, if you were so inclined and didn't want to be developing your own prototype, you could use the P event prototype if you wanted to. And if you were to do that, you could use Tinderbox built-in prototype for that capability as well. On this one though, just so you know, and this is kind of interesting, if you use if I remember properly, let me just double check something here. Participants. If I remember, Yeah, so participants is a set, so that's good. So when you're thinking about two, this is a nice little check. If you open up the Tinderbox inspector and you get like a attribute that Mark's already built into the tool, like participants, you can open up the Tinderbox inspector and then look right here, and it will tell you what type of attribute that is. So now I know participants is a set. So then that lets me manage who the idea of who's participating in a meeting or not. So those are different ways to go about doing that. One other thing that I'll mention to you as well as a little tip or trick, which is interesting. Let's say I'm going to go ahead and delete the meeting prototype. We'll just have fun and use the built-in event prototype. Now watch this. If I copy the event prototype, and now I have two of them, and now which one, and let's say I have this event prototype assigned. Let me do it this way. Let's say I have this event prototype pre-assigned to these notes, and now I copy an event prototype. Now watch what happens. If I want all of my existing notes that have that prototype be addressed by that, I can go ahead and show that, and you'll see if I add status there, you'll see now all of these have status. But let's say and so let's call this one event 1, and let's call this one event 2. Let's say I now copied again, and I'm now going to call this one event 3. If I now want to, and let's say I'm doing this one for the purpose of I want to change and start making modifications, and we'll call this one like event new. You'll notice that the original prototype it gets disassociated from the existing notes, and the new one that you copied is what the existing notes get assigned to. So if you ever want to copy a prototype and start making modifications to it, if you don't want to change your existing notes that are associated with that original prototype, what you do is you copy the prototype, you then all existing notes get associated to the new copy, and then you can then make edits on the older one, which has been unlinked to, or the inheritance was broken between the old one, the original, and not the copy of the prototype. If that makes sense, is that clear, or can someone explain that better? But I mean, kind of just demonstrated it. But does that make sense? This is especially pertinent in larger files when you've got hundreds of notes tied to a particular prototype and you want to then make a change to it. Okay, so that's just a little bit of an aside, and I'll get those away. Let's move up status.
This is Frederick. Can I repeat what you said to make sure I understood it?
Yeah, please. I was hoping someone would actually do that.
So I think what you said is that if you make a prototype, or you have a prototype, and then you assign it to some notes or use it for those notes.
Yeah.
And then you copy it and then edit the original, the edited one will no longer be associated with those notes, but only your copy. And so what you need to, I'm not sure other than that what you said.
Okay, so let me explain. Let's start over again, because I think it's really important. Let's say I've got these 3 notes that are associated with prototype event 3. And now I'm going to make a copy of prototype event 3, and I'm now going to call it event 4, or as a prototype. You see that? Frederick, do you see that?
Event 4 will override
right.
override 3, so what you're saying.
What you're now seeing is all of these existing notes are linked to event 4. So if I were to make changes to event 4, then like adding the different attributes to event 4, all of those notes are all of those all of those notes have God, I keep typing, my fingers are off. All of those notes have will have the typical inheritance that you would get from having a note associated with it. So, and the reason why you want to do this is, let's say you want to now make a different type of note. Rather than calling it events, we'll call it meetings, right? So we're going to call this one like P meeting. So I'm going to take the event note, the event prototype. Take the event prototype, and now I'm going to call this one P meetings. Right? So by doing that, what I'm doing is I can basically make a copy of a prototype, make it so, because I want to use it for in a different, that prototype in a different context with, let's say I want to now, delete, those elements. You'll see these notes don't have that change And now I can create a new note. I'll call it meeting. And now I can assign that new meeting prototype there. So that's a way of like making edits to a, copying an existing prototype, making edits to it to create a new one. The point being is you want to edit the original, not the copy, when you're creating that new one. Otherwise, all of your existing notes that have that original will be if you're making edits to the copy, all of your notes that were associated with that original prototype will get those changes. It took me a while to figure that out, but once you know it, and it just becomes muscle memory. But I thought it would be interesting for you guys to know about that.
Yeah, it's surprising. It seems opposite of what one might expect, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I think the reason is that I probably, and Mr. Bernstein can type up, he probably doesn't even remember why originally, but I suspect it's because of just efficiency of code. It's a lot easier to, give all of existing notes the new named prototype than necessarily something like that would be my guess. But, it probably has to do something with the inheritance backend, but we're just we're guessing at this point. But I wanted to point that out because it's super helpful when you start getting into copying and pasting and doing things with more prototypes. And if you do make that copy and paste and you do the non-intuitive thing of going back to the original and making edits, you won't be able to figure it out. So hopefully that gives you a little tip and trick. All right, and let me give myself a note for my notes. Tips and tricks.
If I recall, I think Mark Anderson has a note about this even in ATB Ref.
Yeah, I think he does too. So let's just go ahead now and do that. Whoops, sorry. All right, I didn't want to collect them all. Okay, so what we now do is we have 3 notes, meeting 1, 2, 3. We have a prototype meeting, and we've got the status attribute is what we're really focused on right now. Now, there's different types of statuses, so let's just say for fun, and again, because we originally added this attribute to this note, we had basically given that note its own inherent displayed attributes, and just to show you what's going for those. And again, I'm kind of being a little pedantic here, but for those that may not, we'll go do it in Quick Stamp. If we go up to Quick Stamp and we type displayed attributes, for those that know all of this, I apologize, but since we're kind of doing a basic 101 review, I'll just highlight some important stuff. You'll note that the displayed attribute of this note is assigned to this note, meaning it's not inherited to any of its prototypes. So if we actually go and click on the inherited button, you'll see that we've now told Tinderbox to re-inherit the displayed attributes, basically reconnect the inheritance between this note and the prototype. And so that's a really quick way to get a note's inheritance back. The other way to go about doing that is this. I think we can do that. Another way to go about doing that, by the way, while we're at it, is we'll say here, and we'll call this one like scheduled. Okay, you'll now see that this note has become bold, and that means that this attribute is no longer linked to the inheritance of the prototype. And if you right mouse click there, you could say use inherited value, and then that's going to reset the note back to the inherited value of the prototype. So those are some other like little strategies of re-inheriting values from the attribute or from the prototype. Okay, so now let's talk about statuses and what we want to do. So let's say this note is what did we open our README? We said to schedule, and we said complete and cancel. Let's use those 3. Just to be simple. So we'll go back and we'll say this note is to schedule. This note is complete. And this note we'll say is cancel. Okay, so here's my point. Let's say you're in map view, for example, and you're looking at these meetings, and you visually have no idea, is this note scheduled and canceled what's its status, and you can click on it and see. But what if you wanted kind of this high level visual overview of what's happening with the status of those notes? That's the problem that I'm trying to address or solve with this demonstration. And let me go ahead and save this file so we have it later. Okay, so I'll rename that later. Okay, so everyone with me so far? Yeah, thumbs up. We're good. Okay, so stop me if nothing's making any sense. So I'm going to go ahead now and add in the hints folder. And let's play around with some different ideas. Actually, before I add the hints folder, let's talk about some different ways of doing this. So let's say on the meeting notes, I wanted to go here, and I'm going to go to a rule, and we're going to add some functionality. And so let's say if status equals, because you need a double equals if you're doing a value association with a note versus an assignment valuation, which is just a single equals, which I'll explain in a minute. So if equals scheduled, or actually let's say if equals to schedule, then what do I want to have happen? What I want to have happen is I want the color to equal, let's say poppy, which is kind of a yellowish color. Okay, and then we'll end the if. Okay, so basically I'm saying, if it's to schedule, then I want the color to equal poppy. And let's then say, and you'll see already that effect is taking effect. And we have also complete, and we also have canceled. So if I go up here and I say if complete, I want it to be green, bright green. And let's do one more block. If, what were the other options? Complete and canceled. Okay. I want this one to be bright red. Okay. So you'll see, and the nice thing with the new Tinderbox, you'll see now that we've got the visual affordance of the different colors. So we go to map view, and we go back down here. There it is. And so now you can see I can look in not prototypes, meetings. I can now see this one's canceled, this one's scheduled, this one is to be scheduled. Okay, so let's go back here, and the difference there is to scale. That's this here. Scheduled. Didn't save that other change. Let's call this one bright blue. There we go. Right. Why am I doing this? Here we go. Complete to schedule canceled. Got it. Complete. Like green. Now I got it right. Okay, it's safe. There we go. So now you see I've got my to schedule, my complete, and my canceled meetings. Now with the canceled meetings, to add an additional view to that, what you might want to do is add another one and say like NameStrike equals true. Okay, so now I can see if a meeting is canceled, I am actually striking it through. And so these are kind of the different visual affordances that you can give yourself when playing with a note. Now that all works great. Now what happens though if you change it, and let's say we're going to delete, and we'll create a note 4 while we're at it, and let's say there is no value here. Okay, well, we have no if condition for the value, and it looks like if you notice on some of these, because while I was playing around with it, we're good. Yeah, that one you'll see that this is okay. So you'll notice that I've canceled, but there's no else state. So if you were going to play with that and say, okay, what do I do if there's no value there? You could then say, and this is where it gets kind of messy. You can then say something like else, and then create an else state, and just reset color to the default. And this is the way to reset color to defaults, like that. And so now you see that its color has been set to default. But the issue with that is if status equals scheduled, then else this. And let's say we do that here too. If status equals, then else that. Now, the challenge for Tinderbox is think about the conditions. If status does not equal to scheduled, then I'm going to set the default to, let's go ahead here and we'll call this one pink. I think pink's the color. You'll see here that you're going to start, let's do a different, let me look at the color palette real quick. Get one that I think about. How about orange? Okay, and this will just kind of explain how this can get confusing. So here I'm saying if the status is to scheduled, make the color poppy, else make it its default. So I would expect in this context, it's not, this node is not to schedule, so I'm expecting it to be gray. But then I go back down here and Tinderbox goes from top to bottom as it's reading your code. If it equals scheduled, else make it orange. So what's happening here is this note has now become orange because it's overwriting this. It's not overwriting it. What it's saying is, okay, it did this section. Now it's going down here and it's not scheduled. So now I'm going to make it orange. So what ends up happening logically with these conditionals is it can get really confusing managing the different condition states and in the order. And if you try to nest conditions, that can even get messier because you can say if this and else that, then else this, else that. So you can get all of these nested conditions that can get really confusing. So Mark Anderson and I found I don't want to say more appropriate, but a different approach for managing these kind of condition states using, and let me paste this here because I was managing the individual notes and not I was breaking inheritance in the process. So then we just go reset that there and we'll re-inherit all those notes. Okay. So let me pause there. Does that make sense? So the problem that actually, again, I don't want to call it a problem. The challenge that I was doing is if you're using if conditionals to set color states and name strikes and such like that, you can find that your logic can get really confusing very, very quickly, and you can kind of start finding yourself getting quite lost with it. Does that make sense, or do we need to? Can someone give me some feedback so I'm not just rambling? Let's go and make that false, right? Because you also see here too, and I'm wanting to turn that off, but even still, I'm kind of losing my and you see now too, all of my notes have gotten on the different colors because these else statements are making it quite confusing. All right, so let me finish making some tweaks there, and then I'll pause and stop there. So one, do you see how conditional? Let me ask two questions. Do you guys see how conditions are used? And two, do you see how when you start trying to make the else statements of like, if it's not this, then do that, how that else statement can get kind of messy really quickly, especially if you're using multiple conditions on a single note. Let me pause there. Comments, thoughts, feedback, things about what I just did don't make sense. Mr. Mernstein, do you have any feedback on that? Or suggestions? You're on mute.
I've talked about this a couple of times. Nested conditionals in particular are now thought to be a code smell. They're fine. They're supported, but they're tricky. It's
Correct.
really easy to get almost running code in which you have a nested conditional which is either valid but not quite what you thought it was, or it's invalid but works anyway because it's missed. For example, missing closed bracket is picked up somewhere else.
Right.
So they're tricky and they're dangerous, and so this is the old way to do it, and it's a good way. It'll get the job done, and a lot of times a little bit of mess is better than spending an afternoon or two doing it cleaner. But Michael,
We're about to show the clean. We're
is
about to
about
show the cleaner.
show a cleaner way to do it.
Correct. And it's really funny because I've been personally struggling this for ages. I've been doing the conditional way up until about Wednesday. And I started thinking about how do I do it differently. And Mark Anderson and I meet for an hour call every Thursday. And just out of the blue, he's like, I've been thinking this. And I'm like, I've been thinking the exact same thing. And so we ended up spending about, a day and a half back and forth, not in terms of duration, not effort, and came up with this new and elegant way of doing it. So let's go ahead and play with our copying of prototype strategy that we just discussed. So I've made a copy of prototype meeting, and I now want to make edits to my prototype. So I'll call this one the old. And now I want all of my existing notes to now adopt the new stuff I'm about to show you. So now I can go ahead and work on, sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm going to go ahead and work on let's put this one down here back in there. We'll call this one prototype old, just so people can have that as an example later. Okay, and we're going to work in this one, and I'm going to delete the rule on that note. And rather than working in, we'll just stay in rules. That's fine. We could also use a library if we wanted to. Now let's talk about a different approach on how to go about doing this. The other reason why I like this, there's a number of reasons. And so the approach I'm about to talk about is using dictionaries. And the other reason why I like this approach is it actually gives me more control over defining types of meetings. So you all know that I like this idea of a resources folder. And while we're at it, we'll go ahead and hit a P, we'll call this one P folder. And I personally find the visuals that Tinderbox gives me super useful. So now I can just, there's my folder. Okay, so I've got a folder here, and let's go ahead, since we're playing Tinderbox fun here, doing a little on add, and we'll say prototype equals P folder. So that way, when I'm adding anything new to this folder, it's going to have the folder prototype, and we'll call this one the status notes folder. Okay, so now I've got a folder called status notes. So let's go back up here and grab those and paste them here. And now what we can, and again, since we're having fun, let's go ahead and just do some Tinderbox action code. This works when you're, and I'm just gonna, I would just typically I just manually make these fixes now, but let's say I didn't want to do that. I could say text dot text equals text dot replace. And I want to replace it with nothing. I want to replace it with a line break. Okay, so when I apply that, that lets me get, automatically parse out all of that extra chaff in the notes that I don't necessarily want. I then can go ahead and do an explode. And I'm going to explode at line breaks, and I'm going to remove the item from text. And so now I have quickly created all of our little status notes that we want. So I'm going to go up here. And so now, since I'm going through this process, I'm now going to need a note called P status. And I love badges, but I have no idea what status note we want to give. What kind of badge do we want to give a status note? Anyone want to suggest anything without
The traffic light.
the what? Which one?
Traffic light. Green, red.
Oh, there you go. Good call. See, that's why I need other people thinking about it. All right, so the traffic light is going to be our status note. Let's go up here and add that to our notes. And since we're doing an on add here, And we can say prototype equals the status. Okay, and then we don't need that anymore. All right, so now we've cleaned up and we now have all of these different status notes. And so now we also know what were the elements that, let's go back to here and let's talk about let's go back to our original README note and let's think about the different elements that we wanted for a status note. We wanted, we all talked about, okay, well, a status note may have a checkbox. It may have flags. It may have a color. It may have a NameStrike value. And again, you don't have to put this into displayed attributes, but I'm doing it simply because, and which one do I miss the badge? And I see that I misspelled it up here. Badge. Okay. So down here. Okay, so you'll see that way, you can see in the status note, I see that the badge is stoplight, the name strike is false, the color is such, and so now we've got to kind of have our the base level elements that we want for our status. Yes, Mr. Art, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, it's not a criticism or anything, but I was just going to point out that when you paste text into your prototype, you're potentially at risk of inadvertently losing text from another note, because it will update.
Perhaps I would say you're not. Yes and no. I'm glad you brought that up. Let me give you an example of that. So if I paste this here, then you're right. Text is actually not inherited. So I'm not losing any context there. So that way, the text of a prototype in that context is not inherited in the sense of if the node already exists. If the node doesn't already exist, then it will be given the text of the original of the original prototype, like in this case here.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. So it's a really good point. This idea of inheritance, it's a really good point, but Mark's kind of pre-thought that through because that would be a disaster if that were to if you were to have a prototype and you could actually overwrite your text that easily. Okay, you with me all so far?
Yeah.
All right, so now let's go through and play with this a little bit. What color? So let's say if it's 1, we want it checked, and if it's lost, we want it checked, and if it's lost, we want it red. On my little color palette, popped up on a different screen. All right, and whoops. Sometimes I don't do this well. How do you, Mike? I don't know why, but when I use the, there you go. I click one up. What am I doing wrong there? Now, how do I get it to keep? There we go. All right. So, so let's say when it's lost, it's red. When it's 1, it's green. Okay. When it's canceled, it's going to be red. Okay. Here's another example. And so this is where you kind of like, colors are great, but they don't necessarily help you completely understand the context of a note. So let's say when it's scheduled, it's blue. Let's say when it's in progress, it's cyan, for lack of a better. And when it's to be scheduled, I think we were playing with that idea of poppy. Let's just make it purple. All right. So those are the different, I did it again. Let's give it a bigger one. Let's say when it's orange or magenta. There we go. Okay. So those are the colors that we've got there. And let's say when it's 1, we want strike through on 1, maybe when it's lost, we want to strike through when something's canceled, we want to strike through. For the sake of just expediency, you can always change these yourselves. But let's say if it's you've got a flag of red when it's canceled, so that way when I click away, you'll see that the arrow turns to a red item as well. And you could also say when it's canceled, you can make rather than it being a spotlight, we could come up with a different, like an X. Okay, and you could, so you can see how you can really start tailoring the visual affordance of your note, depending on the status that you have. So everyone with me so far? Okay, now what we want to do is we want to create a dictionary. So let's go up here, and on our status notes folder within our resource folder, we're going to create a, I personally, and this is all down to personal conventions. So like what Mark would do, Mark Anderson was doing, is he would call it status dictionary. For me, I like to have all of my attributes start with the commonality of the type of attribute that it is, and then dictionary status. So the reason why I do that is, especially with my larger files, and we'll go over here and we'll create that as a dictionary. And again, this is just totally a naming convention that I've done. I tend to use, like is something, like is like, I'll say like if it's a Boolean, like is checked. Right. And I'll just create that one. All of my Booleans, I start with and I'll go over here. All of my Booleans, I start with the word is, so that when I'm looking down in the attribute list, user attributes, all of my attributes of a similar type will all be listed together. So if I were to say like, is checked, is no show title is another one of my common ones. And that's going to be a Boolean. Okay, so that way when I'm doing here, you'll see, let me refresh that. So you'll see all of my attributes of the same type are all going to be bundled together when I'm looking in the user attribute list. I personally find that a lot easier. So similarly, if I start all of my dictionary type attributes with the dict something, dict status, dict whatever, that way they're together in the attribute listing view, and that's just a convention that I found and adopted that's super useful for me. And I'll just give you an example of how, while we're at it, how it can get super messy. So if I'm in one of my other main files, this one's fine. You'll see here, I've just got hundreds of attributes in this particular file, but you'll see all of my Booleans are all grouped together using the is convention for the naming. And so I just find that a lot easier. I'm
getting stressed out just looking at your list of attributes.
One of my files has over 600 attributes, user-generated attributes, not also the other 600 that come with the system.
Time for an intervention, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create a dictionary, and there are a couple. Remember, every note has every prototype associated with it, and the values are accessible across Tinderbox. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this and we're going to create a rule. And the rule that we want to say is we want to say, hey, Tinderbox, what I want you to do is I want you to populate the dictionary with the values of these notes. And so let's just do that incrementally. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating a variable, and we're going to create a dictionary variable. And we're going to call this one vdict for dictionary, and its status is going to equal that. All right, so let's just do this. Okay, we're going to incrementally go through that process like that. So that's going to be the first step. And then what we're going to say is we're going to say, hey, Tinderbox, I want you to create a list as well. And what I want you to do is I want you to have the variable vlist equal to the collection of the children. And now here's where it gets interesting, and I'll demonstrate it, and we'll incrementally do this. So let's say I just want to collect the name of the children. So and I do that. Okay, I can do that, and that let me just do this so I don't have to retype it. Let's see. Okay, there you go. Let's say I just want to collect the here you go. Which note was I on? I think I'm getting myself confused here. Here you go. Let's say I just wanted to collect the name of the children like this. Okay. So now if I click away, and for the sake of that, now the name's not getting populated into the dictionary status element because that's really not an effective name. And also too, because the V list is a variable, so it's not being populated into anything else. Now, if I'm just, let me do this just to demonstrate what I'm trying to explain here. Let's create a list attribute. So this is important. This is kind of an important element. And this also helps with testing. Oops, I didn't want list. I wanted my list. Okay. So let's say I want to take this code here and say my list equals collecting the children of the name. So when I do that, I'm getting the, let's run it. All right, hang on. Let's see. I think this is wrong here. Let's just do that. There you go. I was throwing an error. So when I'm doing that, I'm getting the name of all of the individual children, which is great. But what I want to be able to collect in the dictionary more than just the names. And so I'm going to use the ability that Tinderbox gives me to actually collect ID status. And so what I really want to do, no, I'm not, sorry, ID string. Sorry. What I really want to do is have Tinderbox collect the ID string values. And we're going to go ahead and leave this my list thing up here on the top. We'll remove it later. We'll comment it out later, but this will just kind of help you to see what this variable is collecting. So I'm asking Tinderbox to collect my ID string. And so what that means is what I'm actually collecting is the ID string of each of these individual notes. So that's telling Tinderbox what note I actually wanted to collect. And now what I wanted to do is I wanted to say, I want Tinderbox, what I want you to do is take the V list, and for each item in V list, I want you to do the following. And we're going to use the temporary variable a state to iterate. So when I'm doing this operator, each, what I'm saying is, hey, Tinderbox, go iterate through each item in the list, my V list, in this case, what's currently in V list is my list, and perform the following action. And so what I want you to do is I want you to say variable string a V pairing for the and let me just do this here. And I'm comparing my notes to another file, so I just need to make sure that I am not. There we go. We did it in an edict. There we go. This is what I need to do. Let me just put this into another file so I can incrementally do it. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say, hey, Tinderbox, what I want you to do is I want you to go through and create and we'll do the simplest version first, the original version first. What I want you to do is because I'm bouncing between two files, the screen's getting a little wonky. What I want you to do is I want you to say vpair, variable vpair equals name a state plus a colon plus color. And I'll explain this in just a second. A state. And then I want you to run this. Vdict equals vdict. Add. And then do vpair. Let me just copy this code, just to make sure I get it right. All right, basically I wanted to do that. And we're going to end there. And then we're going to say, I want to make the attribute dictionary status equal to vdict. All right. So what that's done is I'm basically saying, hey, Tinderbox, go and create me a dictionary variable, create me a list variable, go collect all the ID strings, and now iterate through each of the ID strings and grab me the name and the color of that note. And what you're saying is grab me the name of this ID string, grab me the color from that ID string, and then populate the dictionary. And you'll see that Tinderbox has now dutifully done that for us. So if it's in progress, the color is red. If it's, let's go ahead and paste that here. If it's complete, then colon, the color is this other color. If it's scheduled, the colon is this other color. So what you're essentially doing is you're saying, Tinderbox, go build me this dictionary. So then when I have that capability, I then can say, hey, Tinderbox, what I want you to do is, rather than doing the lookup, and let me do this real quick. I'm going to grab it from, I got to look at my other prototype so I get it. What I want you to do is grab me this. Sorry for bouncing back and forth between these two files. I should have done this cleaner for you, but I wasn't actually thinking about doing that this morning. Yeah, let me get this off screen because I think I'm giving you all a raging headache as I'm doing this. Here's the other file. Go here, and the code that I want from this one is that. There we go. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to replace in this, what I'm saying is make, so in the rule, and we'll walk back through this in just a minute. So in the rule of the meeting event, what I'm saying is go grab, and it's not my status, it's status. There we go. What I'm saying is I'm telling Tinderbox to go grab the status of the status. Yeah, go grab status from my status. Okay, got it. And from, I've got two different files I was using. So what I'm telling Tinderbox with this statement right here is I'm saying, no, it's wrong. Damn it. Give me a second as I'm trying to reproduce these different files. Oh, I got myself all confused now. All right, so okay, let me just, I'll reproduce it in this bigger file here. So what do we do in the bigger file? We went through and we said, and I'll share this larger file too. So here are the different statuses that we had. One, overdue, lost. We had different meetings, and you'll see that we have the different statuses, my status, colors, dates, all of that. And we've asked Tinderbox to build us a dictionary. And so the dictionary code that we have now in this context is build me the dictionary code. And then where this gets complicated is marking. And again, I've forgotten how I did the easy part. And so that's what I was having to reconstruct that in real time. What we're doing here is we're telling the note to say, Tinderbox, give me what the default value is. So I'll just walk this through with all of you because I want to get this done before the end of the hour. So create me a dictionary variable. Create me a default value variable. Create me a default value variable for color, flags, and the NameStrike. So essentially we're using the attribute functionality, saying get me the attribute color, get me the attribute for flags, get me the attribute for NameStrike, and get me what that item's default is. So okay, I remember the syntax now. So using the square brackets is you're basically calling that particular item out of the dictionary. Then you're saying, create me the list of those items for all the default values, and then what this code, and then add those elements to the dictionary. So what that's doing is it's creating me the default value for every one of those different for every one of the different attributes, color, flags, and NameStrike. And then what we're saying is here we're saying now go collect me the list of the ID strings like we were just doing. Then I'm saying now Tinderbox, go iterate against the list for me. So what I want you to do is create me a list and then get me the color state, the flags, and the NameStrike of that particular item. And then create me a pairing of that database for that dictionary where, give me the name of the state, won, overdue, lost, and give me the list of those values. So let's go ahead and do this, and I'll show you what's in there. So what all of that code has just done is generated this. It said my dictionary state is lost, and the list of attributes I want to get from the state of lost are basically bright red, the red for the flag, and true for NameStrike. Similarly, for one, I want bright green, green for the flag, true for the NameStrike. If it's overdue, I want bright orange, orange for the flag, and false for the NameStrike. And then if there's a default value, just make it gray and then make everything false and out. So what that does is that allows me to get the dictionary. So then if I'm looking at the individual notes, you'll see here what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, Tinderbox, what I want you to do is go and get me generate a list for me, populate the status dictionary, and grab the from the status elements, and then look up the my status attribute. So he called it my status, I called it status. That's why I was getting myself confused. So the my status in this context is 1. So what you're saying is go get me the list of that particular event, and you're saying create the list of. So functionally what the Tinderbox is doing in this case is it's saying create on this note this particular event. Go get me for status populate this list from the item from the status dictionary in the note status for the value that is in my note. So let's collect. Let me go through that again just so we can read it. So I'm on a particular note, event 1, and what I'm saying is Tinderbox. Every time you run this dictionary lookup on this note, what I want you to do is create me a list of the one bright green and its NameStrike status by looking up in the note status the status dict value. So and then grab the key my status. So let's walk through what's happening then. It's saying what's my key? My key is 1. If I go here. Well, what is the item 1? Here is the item 1 in the dictionary, and the list that I want you passing to me is this. So you're going to pass me the list bright green, green, and true. So now if I go back here, I'm telling Tinderbox make the text equal to my list, just because this is testing. So you see I'm getting bright green, green, and true. Make the color equal to the 0-based item of the first item in the list, which is bright green. Make the flag equal to the second item in the list, which is green, and make the NameStrike to the third item on the list, which is going to be true. So if you see me now, watch this. If I'm in this event note and I change this to lost, you'll see that note automatically changes, because what it did is it's saying for this note, go look up the value lost in the dictionary and bring back all of the elements you want me associating with the value lost. And the elements I want associated with the value lost are red, and NameStrike being true. And so when I do that, this list here is populated with red, and the value of true. And then I'm telling Tinderbox to parse that out.
Sorry, Michael, you accidentally unchecked the on the lost status note, the strike through.
Got it. And if I did that, it should update. And the reason why it's not updating is we've got, I must be missing a conditional thing I haven't fully thought through. And And let's reset that. Okay. So I'm sorry I made this a little bit. I thought I knew this better than I did, but we've just been playing with this for the last 48 hours, so it's not fully vetted in my head yet. So let's start over and from the beginning and think about what we've done here. I think would be helpful. So the goal was or is to create a dictionary. And that dictionary is going to enable us to be able to do lookup. So let's try to now fix that in this file that we were starting here. So far at this point, we've created ourselves a number of status elements, and we've created ourselves a dictionary that has, all of these different elements. So lost equals bright red, red, true. One equals bright green, green, true. Overdue equals bright orange, orange, false. And so you're seeing in, come on. I think the part of the confusion is I've got too many different Tinderbox files open. So when I switch between them, it gets confusing. So let's go here and fix this file. And the reason why that's not getting fully populated is I don't have all of the right code. Let me do this here. It was so much clearer in my head before I got it. This is why they say if you want to learn, if you want to really learn something, teach it, and you realize how much you don't actually know. Let's go here. This is what I wanted. So if we go to this note here, I'm going to make this rule. So what I'm going to do is in our file, so on my status note folder, I'm telling Tinderbox what I want you to do is populate what the default values are for the three different types of items I'm collecting: color, flags, and NameStrike. Grab their ID strings, iterate those through, and then populate my data. My dictionary. So if we do that, you'll now see that didn't work. What did I do wrong? I think I'm missing. Because Mark and I reversed these. This also tells you why do you want consistency. Okay, there you go. So what that code did in this file that we started before is it created a dictionary of all of these items we generated here. So we've said, Tinderbox, go and create a dictionary for me. So default for these items is the default for color is 7. The default for flags is nothing. The default for NameStrike is false. And so that's how we know. And then when we haven't created variables for the other items that we suggested, we easily could. And then we're saying, go through and generate that item for me. Now I've got it. Okay. So then what we want to do here is we want to say on a particular meeting note, let me grab that text here. Copy that. Come back to meeting notes. Let's do that. Okay. So now what we're saying is, and get that right there. Okay. And so now we've got that other file I was showing you in this one. Good to go. And we don't use my status. We use status, and we should be fine. And we're looking up that folder. Now we should have it all reproduced. There we go. Now it's working perfectly. Okay. So let me start all over. That got super confusing. So what did we do here? We started with this idea where we wanted to build the context of our strategy. We wanted to build context notes. And what we then did is we talked about track status notes of all of these different types and what are the different kinds of things that we'd want to track. So that's where we started with our program. And then we started saying, all right, let's go ahead and create some meeting notes. Let's go ahead and create our status notes. And then in our status notes element, we added a rule where we said, Tinderbox, go and build me my dictionary. And what was interesting is and this is what Mark and I were just coming up with yesterday. If you don't include the default, because if I go in here, for example, and I remove that, what's going to end up happening is that note gets defaulted to the default of the note. It's standard badge, it's standard color, and it's standard name striking because nothing's in the dictionary. If I go back and type the to be scheduled again, what's Tinderbox doing? It's looking at the edict of the note, and it's saying, all right, let's look at the very first line. What do I want you to do, Tinderbox? I want you to take the value of status, which is to scheduled, and go look that value up in the dictionary status attribute at notes notes folder. So that's how you put these pieces in. And I want you to then populate that because we're returning a list back to from the dictionary. I want you to populate a variable list. And so that's exactly what's happening. Is it's going here and it's saying, go get me the to scheduled. Go get me the to scheduled item here and return back to me magenta or whatever that is, pink, a null value in true. So now if you think about this, now watch this. Let's say we name strike that and we change its flag to, I don't know, Poppy. Okay. And then we go here. You now see its flag is Poppy and its name is NameStrike because we were changing the values that we're having Tinderbox populate in the dictionary. Does that make sense? I know I confused the living hell out of you guys in that process, but you also see the some of the logic that we need to have here. So let me.
Yeah, sorry, it makes sense. I'm just still a little confused as to how dictionaries are being implemented. I guess it's
So let's go back. Let's go back to the very beginning. And again, obviously, you can see I get it, but not enough to teach it yet. So let's go here and we'll look up. And Mr. Bernstein, I apologize for bastardizing your beautiful code. We'll get it figured out together.
Michael, Mark had to drop off.
Oh, good. Well, okay, then he didn't have to be as embarrassed with everything I'm doing here.
Just to comment, I followed parts of this. When it became more complex, I kind of got left at the back of the class.
Well, I did too, because so you're clear.
What would help me, I don't know if it would help others, but the example, and I appreciated everything you did on this, but the example became a little bit convoluted for me. I would love just a clean, maybe on another date, just a clean dictionary example.
Well, that was a clean dictionary example, but it got more complex. So let's do another one right now.
All right, a clean dictionary example at Bruce level.
Yeah, but no, and again, I started out with clean, but I jumped too quickly to my end state, and I got confused in the middle myself. So let's do a new one.
If I might interject, Michael, it may be helpful to just do one variable dictionary.
Well, that's what I'm about to do. That's what I'm about to do. All right.
Yeah, that's where I was headed.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So
Art.
let's say we have a dictionary of names. Okay. And let's say we go here and we'll call it, and we'll say it's my dictionary. We'll just keep it super simple. Okay.
Michael, before you go too far, would it mess things up to start with a new file?
No.
Is that okay?
And of course, good enough. Let's just do it. All right. So let's got a brand new note here. And let's say, I probably should have started with this in the very beginning. So let's say we have, and we've got people. Let's create a note called people. And in that note called people, it's got a attribute called my dictionary. Okay. And in that my dictionary, let's manually create some pairs. So let's say Bruce is 34 and Michael is,
you're half right,
22, and I'm just randomly doing some numbers here. And let's say Pat is 45 and Jane is 25. Okay, so let's just playing with ages, right? And that's our dictionary. And dictionary items are, so we've manually produced a dictionary, and dictionary items are basically the item you're looking up in the dictionary, colon the value that item that's going to return. So when I look up Bruce, I expect to get 34. When I look at Michael, I expect to get 22. When I look at Pat, I expect to get 45. And so if I go and do this and paste that in, now let's say I'm in another note. We'll call this one note 2. And I'm now going to do a stamp because that's one of the easier things to do. And we'll call this stamp lookup. Okay. And what do we, and we totally should have started this in the first place. Sorry. We're going to say, let's make our text equal to the value that we're going to look up. Make sense? So what we're going to say is, what I want you to do is I want you to make text equal to the, what do we, my dictionary. My dictionary in note people. And what I want you to do is look up, I think that should be, look up. Ah, I got it. What we need to do is we need to know, well, what are we looking up? And we want to look up the value of my string. Okay, so that's the basic element of a dictionary. So if we go here and we say my string, and so what we're saying is we want, hey, Tinderbox, what I want you to do is go look up. All right, move this out of the way. There it is. What Tinderbox, what I want you to do is I want you in note 2. So really simple. We created it in the note people, we created a dictionary called My Dictionary. And in that My Dictionary, it's got a list of names with ages associated with it. So what I want to say is, hey, Tinderbox, what I want you to do is go look up in the attribute My Dictionary in the note people. We should put this in quotes. Go look up the value in my string. And so if I go here and type in the word Bruce, so now the value of my string is Bruce. So when I apply this stamp, it populates 34. Because what it's done is it said, take the value Bruce, go over to the note people, and look up in its My Dictionary attribute the associated value with the word Bruce. Similarly, if I've got the name Jane here, oops, Jane here, go look up the value and of Jane, and did I not? So Jane's 25. And if I type Michael, go look up the value, and the value is 22.
You actually, Michael, might simplify this by when you, instead of calling it note 2, call it, note Jane, for example.
Or I could, if I could, but also too, I'll just call it lookup age.
And the, yeah, fine. And what is really the idea of dictionaries? I think probably a good point to interject that here is to, why do we use dictionaries in Tinderbox?
So why do we use dictionaries? We use dictionaries to be able to look up values of particular notes. So let's say I had, and now let's complicate it a little bit. So let's say I had a list of people and their ages, like we've just done. Let's say I had a list of exchange rates. What's the current exchange rate of US to British pounds? What's the current of this to that? There's a value that I'm wanting to pull into something else. So let's say, so in other words, what I'm asking Tinderbox to do is go out to some other note and grab me a value and bring it back so then I can do something with it. Right.
Michael, so I don't know that we're going to get there today, but you bring up an interesting point because ages and exchange rates are dynamic because obviously they're going to change, as opposed to certain values are going to be static. Once you put it in, that's what it's always going to be.
But actually, that's a really good point you bring up. So let's forget about exchange rates because yes, they are constantly dynamic, but even that you can do in Tinderbox. But let's look at age, for example. So if we have the date of birth of each of these people, you can then basically use the dictionary to look up what their age might be on a given day. So
You could.
say
Yeah,
driver's
if you
license.
had their date of birth. Yeah, if you have their date of birth as opposed to actually a raw age.
Right. So now
Tinderbox,
that
go
information is,
get me their birth date. And then go do a calculation to see what their age is going to be on such and such a date in the future.
so that's where dictionaries are great, because basically you may open that file after 6 months, and on that 6 months later, you may find that 18 of your candidates have now reached the age of 25 years, which is a dynamically changing thing, but it can be pre-computed.
Yeah. So bear with me if you a little bit, if we can go back to some of the basic functions here. So what I was talking about before, though, and what I was trying to demonstrate unsuccessfully, was manually building this dictionary would be a total pain in the butt, and typically would not be the way you'd go about doing it. If I go here and you see I've got Bruce, Michael, Pat, and Jane, the reality is you're probably going to have something like this. You'll have a note called people, and you'll have Bruce, Michael, Pat, Jane, right? And you're going to have in each one of these, we'll create an attribute called age. And it's a number, right? And there you'd have, and what value did we get Bruce? 34. You'd have that value here, right? So what I was demonstrating to you earlier with that other blob of code, which I didn't explain clearly, is you're not going to want to necessarily be manually building this dictionary all the time. What you want Tinderbox to do is actually dynamically build the dictionary for you. And essentially that's what I was attempting to demonstrate here. So if I were to, if let's say I was to add a new status here, we'll call this one new status, and we'll give it a different color. Let's give it like brown, and we'll say its NameStrike is this, and its flag is calendar. Okay, so now you see I've got this item called new status. All of that code I was demonstrating to you before, what this is doing is, you see like here, you see the .add. This is basically say, go to your children, iterate through your children, and add this new item that you find into the dictionary. So now if I look here, and Steve, you can reply in just a second, you'll see that I've now got a new item called new status. So what this code's doing here is it's helping me dynamically build the dictionary. So I'm not having to do it manually. That was step one, right? And then once I've got it, once I have that dynamic building of the dictionary, you'll see that you'll see then what I'm doing now is I'm saying for each of these individual notes, Tinderbox, go look up the value in that dictionary, which happens to be a list, and then parse that list and populate the associated attributes for that particular meeting. And so therefore you now have status.
And this edict can be put in with the prototype. So therefore, every time you create a new meeting note, technically you're actually also giving it affordance to be able to go to the My Dictionary, the status note folder.
Correct. So if I go here and say today's TBX meeting, right, and I give that meeting note, and we'll say it's like today, now, and then I say, and as of in just a few minutes, it will be complete. I'll go ahead and say complete, and then automatically it gets now green because it's complete. So
even your status, you can actually have it as a pop-up, right? So you can
and again, any value I have in the statuses are automatically completing here. So if I wanted to do it that way, watch this. Remember, this is another thing we can do. If I go ahead and here's status. So the other bit of code I'm going to want to add to the rule of this note is I'm also going to say make status equal to collect children name. So by doing that, Tinderbox is automatically collecting the name of all of the different statuses and populating the status field with status. So now when I go here all of those values are always going to be available to me. So that if I want a different one, I just uncheck that one and I create that one. Right. And it's going to be great. I should.
In this code, you have like a self-contained meeting feedback system for all the colors and
Correct.
appearances.
Correct.
So you just paste this into your Tinderbox project, Bruce, and roll with it.
Right. So
Well, what's
basically,
interesting also, I mean, without a whole lot more work, it seems to me you've got a basic CRM functioning.
100%.
And that's kind of cool. That's,
Yeah.
you know,
So-
I realized that this got a little messy, but just kind of showing what's possible. That was really interesting.
So what I neglected to say in the attempt of trying to teach this to you all was kind of step one is you want to think through, you want to build the dictionary. And then step two, if you can actually type dictionary. And then step two, you want to apply the values from a lookup. Right. And that's basically what we've just done today. We've built the dictionary and then we do apply the values from a lookup in the dictionary based on a value in a particular node. Now, I went to the end state complexity thing which I tend to do, which is I should have slowed it down a lot because I hadn't
Michael,
planned on talking.
not to interrupt, but I see Steve has his hand up for a while.
Yeah, Steve, go for it.
So as I'm thinking about this, it's like a second set of prototypes. So you sort of have this status thing, which acts kind of like a prototype in that depending on the status, it will apply different updates. Is that how you thought about it? And the second question that I have is using the dictionary is quite cool. And then you have basically a separated list of the different values you want. Did you consider perhaps putting the actual action code as the value for each of the keys and then just execute the action? You following?
I did, but that becomes very gnarly to manage. Yeah, you know, especially when you start getting multiple parameters that you want to have changed dynamically. And you can also see, if we go back to the very beginning, let's not forget what we also talked about today is think about the different, you know, right now I was just managing 3 conditional states versus say 5, right? You know, using dictionaries for managing the various elements of a condition versus say the if else conditions that we were talking about in the very beginning, the dictionary is so much more efficient once you can actually wrap your head around it.
I'm suggesting using the dictionary, and the keys are the different statuses, and the value for each key is actually the action code as opposed to simply the values that
I don't know. Well, I think that would get super messy beyond imagination, because remember, action code in itself has semicolons in it. And action code, as we're showing, you know, what I hear you suggesting is, you know, have all of this. Let me do it here. Where is it? What I hear you suggesting is have all of that action code actually be a dictionary item, and that's not the way that wouldn't bode well at all. Too many special characters in the regex, the dictionary would get super messy really quickly. You want to kind of keep the values of the dictionary as discrete as possible and not just be a bunch of code. You could, but I don't think it would work.
Okay. The other thing would be a dictionary of dictionaries. So for each value.
Yeah, you could try playing with that too. But again, I apologize everyone for not having thought through the appropriate methods of teaching this today. But I think stumbling through the teaching process, hopefully we got there, you know, got to an end state where you guys kind of learned a little bit about the dictionaries and how they work. And I think the key thing that we wanted to emphasize is, and the other thing to remember, what are the elements of a dictionary? You know, Mark's given us a lot of different code, we can add to a dictionary. We can see what is contained in a dictionary. We can get counts of items in a dictionary. We can see if the dictionary is empty. We can extend it. We can search in it. We can look up its keys, etc. And so, and this example here is where we're looking up the keys. So we're basically saying, hey, Tinderbox, go get me the dog. And the dog is an animal. That's what we were just demonstrating here. So when we said in this example here, we're saying, go get me the Michael and get me the age 22. Here we're saying, go get me the to scheduled and get me the list of all of the values of the attributes that we want to populate from the list to scheduled, and then apply those to the note. And that's basically what we were just demonstrating. All right, that'll work. Okay, maybe next time when we do this, it will be cleaner if I had more time to actually teach it as opposed to stumbling across it. But thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's session.
Thanks. There were a lot of positive comments. I don't know if you saw them.
I didn't see any of them, so I just wish it was a little bit more fluid. But we got there in the end, thankfully, with all of your help. Awesome. All right. Have a glorious week, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.